Hey everyone, what is going on? What is going on? Welcome back to the broadcast here. This is That Man Show. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am your host, executive coach. I help high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence. Guys, I am excited to be back here. This is my first show of the year. We're into the 22nd day of the month here, the first month of January. And I am super excited to be back here. Be back here live. So I definitely had taken a hiatus. I felt I needed a break. Well, I did need the break, but also I moved, and so once I moved, it took me some time to get my room together and just start my room / office / sanctuary and all that stuff. So again, I want to welcome you back, guys. I'm super excited to be back. And again, I know that we are in the 22nd day of the first month, being the first year, or the new year, I should say. I want to say Happy New Year to you all. And again, thank you for attending. So bear with me, guys. Give me 1 second here. We're actually streaming on multiple platforms. So bear with me for just one moment here. Make sure I'm able to see some information that's popping up here. So apologize. Make sure I'm seeing everything. Yeah, LinkedIn has changed their layout here, so so bear with me, guys. So we're matter of fact, while I'm doing this here, we're on Substack. It's a platform I've been over on Substack for maybe about 4 or 5 months now. Over on Substack, and then also over on LinkedIn. Obviously is kind of my main platform here, and we're on Facebook and we're on YouTube. So over on YouTube, it's Men's Life Coaching. Over on YouTube, that's going to be the @ Men's Life Coaching over on YouTube. And Substack, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's Men's Life Coaching as well. So bear with me, guys. I want to make sure I'm seeing these notes here. View the event. Oh, wow. My apologies, guys. I'm not sure what the heck is going on. Okay. Yeah, I apologize, guys. LinkedIn has changed some things here, guys. So bear with me. I'm trying to. I think we got it here. Okay, over on LinkedIn. So we're live over on LinkedIn, guys, and again at YouTube at Men's Life Coaching. And on Facebook, it's going to be my private page over on Facebook. So if you're connected with me, you can check me out over on Facebook. If not, YouTube is also available, and also LinkedIn and Substack. So guys, thank you for being here. We've got a great show in front of you. We're talking about, can these dry bones live? Breathing hope into life's desolate places. That is the topic of discussion. So guys, again, still trying to. I hope I'm live over on Substack. There we are. Okay. Wow. Seems like all kinds of stuff breaks loose here. All right, guys. I'm trying to make sure that I am live over on Substack. So I do apologize, guys. Again, this is a one-man show here. Sometimes it's difficult to bring it all together by yourself. All right, so I'm live over on Substack. So, guys, again, if I missed some of your comments, again, don't charge it to my heart. Just kind of going back and forth to different screens here. So, again, we're talking about, can these dry bones live? And breathing hope into desolate places. That's your desolate places. So we're going to make this personal. So again, my name is Curtis Brooks. I'm an executive coach. I help high achieving men master the art of integrated leadership and authentic masculine presence. So we got a great show for you guys. I have been MIA for quite some time now, and I am glad to be back. I'm comfortable in this place here, and sometimes it gets a little chaotic, but nevertheless, making sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. It can be a little cumbersome at times, but I'm definitely comfortable in this space here, in this seat here. So glad to be back. Hope that all of you are doing well. Again, we're talking about, can these dry bones live? Breathing hope into desolate places. To give you some background, Ezekiel, this story here does come from the Bible. So, but I don't want you to get caught up in that and so much who the characters are, but grab the principles from the story. Grab the encouragement. That's what this is ultimately about you being encouraged through your situations, whatever they may be, whatever you may have been going through currently or in the past, still dealing with the fragments of that situation. That's what this story is about, giving you encouragement through the valleys that we all will go through. It doesn't matter who you are, we'll all go through these different valleys. So that being said, just a little bit of background. Now, Ezekiel is a what they call a major prophet within the Bible in the Old Testament. He's a major prophet. And so that essentially means that he plays an instrumental piece in this discussion about God and what God is doing and what He has spoken to Ezekiel. All right. So a bit of background. Ezekiel. This story comes here. This conversation comes. I'm not going to read all of the scriptures, but this story does come from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, verses 1 through 14. So the story begins where Ezekiel, I'm just going to give you a synopsis of it. The story begins where Ezekiel is talking with God, and it doesn't say how he got there. Perhaps he's in a dream or something like that. So those are just my take on it. But it doesn't say how he got there. But nevertheless, he's talking with God. And in his conversation with God, he is God presents this place to him, and the Bible calls it the Valley of Dry Bones. All right, this massive area, and it's called the Valley of Dry Bones because it really is it talks about Israel had fallen away from God spiritually, and they just abandoned God and had fallen succumbed to other gods and things of that nature. So again, we're talking about the background, and we're talking about Ezekiel, the story of the Valley of Dry Bones. And so God eventually asked Ezekiel, as he's kind of surveying the land, this area, this Valley of Dry Bones, God eventually asked Ezekiel, can these dry bones live? And Ezekiel responds, as he's just, you could imagine in a situation, Ezekiel is responding like, wow, you're asking me. And he eventually says, God, only you know that. Only you know that. And so after God says this to Ezekiel, God then says to Ezekiel to speak to the dry bones. And as Ezekiel begins to prophesy to the dry bones, he begins to hear the movement, the shuffling of things within this Valley of Dry Bones. And I wouldn't say that he's alarmed or just taken back or anything like that, but just perhaps, I don't know. But nevertheless, he hears all this shuffling, and it in fact is God bringing the tendons and the bones, all these things together, and putting skin on these bones. And eventually, God asked Ezekiel to breathe life into them, to give them the breath of life. And this is being the Spirit of God. And Ezekiel does that. And at some point, this Valley of Dry Bone becomes a vast army of the fallen soldiers at one time who had fallen for various different reasons, but they become an army that God has reinstated, so to speak. So today we want to talk about the valley that you might be going through. We want to talk about those areas in our lives, our personal lives, that we may be challenged with. Maybe a disagreement with our spouse, or a continuous disagreement with our spouse. Maybe it's something to do with our children. Maybe it's something to do with our parents, something that our parents said or something our parents did that we never got over. Maybe it's through a previous marriage. Maybe it's you and I growing up in places of lack. and we're fighting certain challenges, or we find ourselves still fighting certain challenges. And in most cases, for a lot of us, this can absolutely be our valley. This can be that desolate place that we may be dealing with. And I want to take a moment and look up the word, not look it up, I already have it. I just kind of took a screenshot of it, but I want to read you the definition of the word desolate. And again, this is just me framing this conversation so that we're all aligned. And the word desolate means, and I know in most instances not to challenge your intellect, but just wanted to kind of give us some more background and build a story on this here. The word desolate means to be barren or laid waste, devastated. It means to be deprived or destitute, solitary, lonely, having a feeling of being abandoned by friends or by hope. Something that is dismal and gloomy. Now, again, I read that definition to you not to challenge your intellect, but to just give you some more background, because this is just what God had taken Ezekiel through. That is that valley of dry bones. And you might say, well, Curtis, how do I relate to that? Because that's not my story. I'm not Ezekiel. I'm not going through a valley or anything like that, Curtis. That's the Old Testament. That has nothing to do with me, Curtis. I need you to bring this home and tell me about my current situation. How does this help me in my current situation, Curtis? Well, I'm going to tell you, or at least encourage you through it. See, this valley of dry bones can be, as I mentioned earlier, it can be anything. Anything that you may be going through. And I may not necessarily be able to put a finger on exactly what you're going through, but this is your valley. These are your challenges. These are your desolate places. Oftentimes, we as people, we shrink back when we're dealing with different challenges. Men might go to what we call a cave, go into hiding, so to speak. Now, this is not just about picking on men, because women deal with their things differently as well. It may cause a person, man or woman, to begin drinking, or now in a place they're dealing with some kind of dependency. It could be anything. So we're not here to pick to poke fun at someone or to dig at someone, but we are to express in a more candid and authentic way that the valley exists for all of us. It can be dreams that we have had to put on the back burner because of our children, or we had a family. It could be a host of all kinds of different things that we're dealing with. It could be consulting those places that we are in need of having those conversations that we need to discuss, and we're reluctant to. And the less we talk about that thing, the more in life, or again, whatever that thing might be for us, the less we talk about it, the more it falls into the category of an experience. And I believe in all my heart that most of us, if not all of us, the only way that we're going to get through the cycle of things that we need to get through, or at least prevent our own minds and habits, if you will, that we may have picked up from going through that cycle, is to confront the feelings that come out of the different experiences. So your valley can absolutely be a valley of multitude of different experiences that you said, oh, not again. I'm not going through this again, Curtis. You can be challenged with the idea that that you're having to deal with this that situation, and be ready to move on to yet another experience and yet another experience. Now, understand, the valley of dry bones didn't just show up one day. And so I'm kind of turning the corner in this, because we're not talking about Israel now. We're talking about ourselves. We're making this personal, because now the valley of dry bones is not about Israel, the Bible anymore, but it's referencing that scene, that scenario, that story, but it's more about our individual valleys. It's more about the things that we have put on the back burner, the things that we started and we ran into a hiccup and we wanted to bury that thing. But nevertheless, we invested perhaps gobs of money, lots of money, relationships, marriages, friendships. We've invested so much time on that particular project, trying to make relationships work that should have never been in the beginning. But nevertheless, we've invested time in those things. We have set the course for yet building another project, and yet another project, and another project. Because remember, the valley of dry bones, it didn't just start out of nowhere. The valley of dry bones, in essence, is all of our projects, the work that we needed to do within our own selves, the work that we needed to do, just again, a host of different projects that are left unfinished. More for so on a spiritual basis. So this valley didn't just show up. These are different experiences that we've had through the course of life, who we have now vacated. And so eventually we've got this valley of desolate things. We've got a valley that needs to be tended to. I'm still here, guys, trying to make sure I'm not seeing any comments. We've got a valley that needs to be tended to. We've got conversations that need to be had. There's yet another story where in the Bible here, the Bible talks about the man who sat at the pool of Bethesda for 38 years. And yet in this situation, he was confronted by Jesus himself in relationship to what he was dealing with. And Jesus didn't even go into all of what he was going through, all of what he was having issues with. But he did, in fact, ask him, did he want to be made whole? Yeah, Jesus asked him if he wanted to be made whole. And he decided that he wanted to go into the story about why he was not in that place after having been at the pool of Bethesda for nearly 38 years. So he wanted to go into a story of why he did not or wasn't made whole. And I again, it doesn't say this, but in my mind, I see Jesus kind of just saying, wait a minute, I asked if you wanted to be made whole. And perhaps the man even getting upset because Jesus didn't let him finish his story. And this is like, again, this valley of things that we're all dealing with or we've dealt with. It can be losses, death that we are challenged with. The loss of a family member, loss of a child that we're dealing with. Again, all of our valleys. Not to mention society. What views has society placed upon us? What ideas has society placed in our lap that aren't ours? We find ourselves going along to get along. Now, I talked about this some time ago about the importance of having a belief system. It is hugely important, and oftentimes, when you don't have that belief system secured, you're not grounded in a particular belief system. You are subject to believe what they give you. You are subject to believe what society gives you. And it said that, well, Curtis, everyone has some kind of belief system. And it is true, probably. But if your belief system cannot challenge the systems and the powers to be, so to speak, from a spiritual perspective, because, excuse me, that in fact is what's taking place, is that our belief systems have been challenged. Our belief systems have been compromised. And this is exactly what the men who are now, or at least in that valley that they were dealing with, this is where they were at, because their belief system was compromised. Because they chose not to stand on the things that God had already presented to them. Now, this message is not about trying to convert any of you, but this message is about understanding that if you and I don't take a stand on our particular belief systems, we're going to be meshed in with in this blender of belief systems. And yet there's a belief system that I believe that is higher than them all. And that is having a relationship with God. And again, this is not about converting anyone, but this is to understand that without a belief system, and understanding that for all of us, so to speak, our belief system has been hijacked. It's been hijacked. And because it's been hijacked, we don't understand, unfortunately, the power that we have, the person that you are, the authority that you have been given, all of the options that have been presented before you. We don't know those options when we don't have a belief system that is anchored in understanding, anchored in wisdom, anchored in compassion. So it becomes very difficult to speak to the valley that we may be dealing with, that we might be in, currently walking through. It becomes very difficult to walk through that valley. Now, this is not about naming it and claiming it, as some people say in the church and things of that nature, but it is about a faith that is going to be tested through the course of life. It's about faith being tested. And when faith is tested, it can absolutely feel like we're in a war. We're in a war zone, because not everyone is going to be able to stand in the midst of when their faith is being tested. It's absolutely going to make it feel like you are on a battlefield, and now you're dealing with the casualties of all the things that you once believed that are no longer standing, so to speak. And you need a word of encouragement to come by one day that reinstates you, not in your current state, but a word that comes by one day that reinstates you in your new mindset, your new belief, your new understanding. And it can be difficult to recognize that word, or recognize the person who is bringing the word to you, or coming to encourage you when life says otherwise. It can be difficult to be encouraged, to receive encouragement, when all that you have tried to accomplish in your own strength failed. And now you are stuck with this valley of dry bones, this desolate place. And oftentimes this desolate place that we're in, we find ourselves in throughout the course of life, this desolate place, it needs to be revisited. And I think that it takes it takes someone higher than ourselves, so to speak. It takes someone willing and with the courage and the know-how to help us go back to that place. So whether Ezekiel was in a dream or whether he was in a physical space, an actual valley of dry bones, that's not so much the question. But it does take someone to bring us back to this space where we're prepared to look at this desolate place that we've created. Because ultimately, we're responsible for the things that we create. And even when there's conflict that shows up in the course of life, and it happens for all of us, even when conflict shows up, we're responsible for doing the things that we need to do to reestablish those things. Not necessarily reinvent ourselves, but to reestablish ourselves and to get ourselves back on the right track. To get ourselves back into that place of being hopeful, not hopeless, but being hopeful. And oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, is that it's difficult to see that hope when you've had to forsaken your dreams, your ideas, or forsaken different relationships for all different kinds of reasons. Relationships didn't work out, loss of a family member, loss of a loved one, again, a host of different things. Perhaps an individual dealing with addiction, perhaps you're dealing with loneliness. Again, a host of different things. You're fearful of this, you're fearful of that. That's the valley that the word has come to bring you out of. Because unless we face these valleys and begin to encourage ourselves to come out, we can find ourselves pushing back against life, pushing against the current rather than going with the flow. We can find ourselves dismissing life and the people around us. We can find ourselves bringing about a loneliness. But sometimes when we're in that loneliness, or we're dealing with things that show up in our valley, it's hard to understand how we may have gotten there. Because we can find ourselves playing the blame game throughout the course of this long journey. Because in fact, it is a journey. It's a journey to find out to who you are as a man or a woman. It's also a journey to dismiss the things that you and I have been going through. It's a journey. And most of us are on that journey of dismissing the things that we've gone through. And so it almost feels like a animal going to the slaughter. And life has to entertain us, so to speak, before we take that final call. So this word today has come to pull you out, to yoke on your chain, so to speak, to tug on your chain, and to remind you that that's not the direction that you want to go. To let you know that you are absolutely not alone in this place. to let you know that the valley is there for a reason. And in most instances, it's not all of our doing. Sure, there are other people who played their role or played their part in creating this valley, this stuff that we're dealing with. Absolutely, there, and it just didn't show up by itself. But there were other components. Just like the man who said at the pool of Bethesda, he wanted to give God all of this stuff for why he did not get into the pool, why he was not healed. Because it's easy to say, well, of course he should have. 38 years is a long time. Of course it is. But how long have you been sitting with your stuff? And now when we put it in that frame of mind, we can absolutely begin to find the compassion that's necessary. Because truthfully speaking, when I first read that story years ago, 38 years absolutely seemed like a long time. But now that I lived for a little bit, I can see that how that 38 years of dealing with the rejection or the abandonment that he may have been dealing with, or the rejection or abandonment that you might be dealing with. I could see after so long, because let's face it, now sometimes there's some things that take place in life that we're not going to understand, but you have to live a little in order to understand, because some of us have not lived a little to understand. Some of us have had lots of experiences, but the living part is dealing with the feelings that come up, because oftentimes that living piece of it, that those feelings, they have a tendency to either give us life or feel like that life is being taken away from us. Now, this is the reality that oftentimes in understanding things on a much deeper level, you have to live a little. So when I read this man who sat at the pool for 38 years, again, many, many years ago, I was like, wow, 38 years is a long time. And it's in my own mind, really, looking back, I remember saying, that's ridiculous. But now let's look at our situation. And whatever your situation might be, let's take a bird's eye view of it. Now, how does it stand up against the man who sat at the pool for 38 years? How does it show up? Or how does it compare to what you might be going through? How life sends people in our lives. And sometimes for what we're going through, we can be in a place where we don't know how to receive what they're bringing. We don't know how to receive that gift. We don't know how to, we can't wrap our minds around it. We can't even begin to understand that, in fact, that it's an encounter. So it can be difficult receiving a word of encouragement. It can be difficult wrapping our minds around it because I'm used to the abandonment. I'm used to the rejection. I'm used to that people leaving, going in and out of my life. That's what I know. That's what I've become comfortable with. So I just sit here year after year after year, and before you know it, you're having an anniversary of pity Now, I'm not to say that what you might be going through is not real. That's not for me to say. I'm not to say that it's not valid. But I am here to say, oftentimes when we are in those dark places, we have a tendency to turn the lights off on everything else that we touch. We have a tendency on killing a hope in another person. We have a tendency of trying to turn off someone else's light. We have a tendency to come with those sob stories each and every time we meet somebody. We just met someone. And now we're sharing that story for why we have not been healed yet. And whatever your story might be. But we're sharing that story with individuals for reasons why we have not been healed yet. For reasons or excuses for why we didn't do X, Y, Z, whatever that may be. So this is the dilemma. This is the place that we're stuck in. This is the promotion that we give to people, or things that we promote in the sight of people. This is our marketing plan, which in fact is no marketing plan, but this is what we do. So how do we get out of that place? How do we get out of that place? Now, it's going to be impossible to list the numerous amounts of valleys that people are dealing with, because everyone's dealing with a different valley. Some people have been in their valleys longer than others. Some people are just starting the journey. But again, that valley representing all kinds of different things. And again, the question now is, how do we get out of this valley? Oftentimes, if you have been listening to my live streams here, my broadcasts here, you have heard me talk about a mask that we all wear on some level. And not all of us are still wearing a mask, but to some degree, a lot of us, we have grown up with wearing a mask. And we're talking about how to get out of this now, breathing life into the desolate places that you may be dealing with. Now, you first have to be willing to receive the help now. Okay? You first have to be willing and open to receive it. Because let's face it, you very well could be in a place where, well, Curtis, you don't know my situation. And I'm dealing with X, Y, Z, and this and that. You don't know my situation. And you're right. I don't know your situation. You're right. But I will say this, that the longer you stay in this situation, your situation will affect everything around you. And to the point that we will take the life out of the very things that have come to give us life. And perhaps the people are leaving because of our stuff. Perhaps the people are not showing up, or our reason for feeling still at 34 years, 38 years, the anniversary of our abandonment, the anniversary of our rejection. Perhaps it's the luggage that we're carrying. And again, this is not overshadowing your story or trying to say that the other person is not at fault. Or it's not to say the other person didn't do anything wrong, or were at least play their part in causing this. It's not to say that they didn't, but it is to say that it's now in your lap. We have to fix ourselves. We have to fix the situation, because if not, our children begin to deal with the same things that we have not dealt with. I too have had to deal with my stuff. No one escapes this thing, ladies and gentlemen. No one escapes. No one. I've had to look at how my father grew up. And even though I didn't grow up with my father, I did, my biological father, I was able to see him a couple different times. And my observation from what I've seen and the things, what I've gathered, he didn't talk a lot, but we did talk, but not a whole lot. But from the observation, he was dealing with his own valley. And oftentimes, because of our parents and their parents and so on and so forth, that ancestral loop or chain, so to speak, is that when our parents have not dealt with the things that they need to deal with, that will set them free, so to speak, and I'll use that very loosely, but the things that they need, that they may need to heal from, the things that they might need to overcome. When our parents have not dealt with those things, they in fact become our things to deal with. We then become the person bearing the burden of something that we didn't do. We become in a place where we're having to be fitted for someone else's stuff. And I would even submit to many of us, or to you and all those who are listening, is that in most cases, that's where we're at. We're having to go through life and be fitted for someone else's garment. The garment never fit. It wasn't ours, but nevertheless, we've got our parents' stuff, the things that they didn't deal with, and now we've got the stuff that we need to come into. We've got the growth that needs to take place at some point. So, this is how I dealt with my stuff. This is how I came out of that cave, for lack of a better word. I begin to have authentic conversations. And those authentic conversations, I know oftentimes we hear the word of being authentic, and it can seem or sound like it's been overused. But I would say to stand right there. Take a stand right there and be still. Because what I discovered is that, much to what Ezekiel said, or God says to Ezekiel, and just the synopsis of the story I was sharing with you, the Valley of Dry Bones, is that God said to Ezekiel, can these dry bones live? God knew the answer, but also Ezekiel knew that in his own strength, he couldn't do it. He knew in his own strength that he couldn't do it. So he knew the reliance was God. So here's how I came out. I began to have authentic conversations with God. It didn't require anyone being there. It didn't require help. But it did require me being sick and tired of my situation. It did require me having to decide that I wanted answers. It did require for me to understand. And so The word understanding means to stand under something. Stand under that thing that you are confused about, that we just can't wrap our mind around. So that you can get understanding. So that now you can take that mountain that once was a burden, you can now overcome that mountain because you had to understand it. Now, there are often times in my own personal life, guys, that sometimes I don't want to be made small. I don't want to be made small. Sometimes I want to stand up and do this thing because I know I can do it. But the reality of it is that the only way to thread the needle, you might have to take your glasses off. You might have to look more intently and be focused. You have to be made small. We have to be made small to get through the situations that we need to get through, myself included. We have to be made small, not small in a sense that we are lesser than, but small in a sense of the reliance that we need to have in God. Because life isn't so much happening to us as we have the potential to happen to life. You can absolutely feel like life is happening to us, for sure. But until we begin to have those authentic conversations, prepare ourselves to be made small, or to humble ourselves under the guise of the things that you and I don't understand. Because what has to happen is, I'm not sure how to say this any other way, but what has to happen is a crushing. And yeah, I know it sounds intense, but the olive has to be crushed. And it's interesting because oftentimes I would say, in the past, I've said, Lord, why do they use an olive, not a grape? Because most of us, if you tried grapes before, you know they can be pretty juicy, right? And just one squeeze or you step on it and it's stuff everywhere. Not with an olive. Not with an olive. There's some serious pressing, some serious crushing or pressure that you and I will need to be under in order to draw the oil out of an olive. So I began to have these authentic conversations. And these authentic conversations were, in fact, me peeling back the layers of the stuff that I did not deal with. Peeling back the layers of the abandonment. Peeling back the layers of the rejection. Now that's my stuff. What's your stuff? What are the things that you might need to peel back the layers on? What are some things that you might need to feel in the midst of as you're peeling back those layers? Because, again, as I said earlier, it's not about blaming someone, because oftentimes that, in fact, is what takes place. We begin to blame those people, especially those who are close to us. We begin to blame those people, or at least trying to find an outlet on where we can go with this disagreement that we're dealing with within ourselves, this internal disagreement, this internal fluctuation that we are being challenged with, up and down, like a roller coaster. We've got to go somewhere with that disagreement because we know it's not ours. We know that we weren't the person to blame for what we've gone through. But nevertheless, I'm left with this racket, this noise that's being going back and forth, this looping that's going back and forth in my mind. Curtis, how do I stop that looping that's going back and forth in my mind? You have to be prepared to have those authentic conversations. That's how you remove that mask. Now, it's not going to happen overnight now. It's not going to happen overnight because, mind you, the onion, and metaphorically speaking, the onion is huge. The onion is massive. And I know that doesn't necessarily describe how big it is, but it's massive. It's big. It's a big onion. But nevertheless, the onion is, in most cases, something that we feel like we've lost control of. And now we have to get in there and get our hands dirty and be prepared to peel back the layers of our stuff. And now we're ready to, or at least having to walk through that valley that we may be dealing with, that valley of stuff that we have neglected. The things that we've known that have been there. We've known these things in most of the cases. We've known these things that have been there. But we're also fighting the things that underneath all that other stuff that just has us uncomfortable. And the more and more we have these authentic conversations, the more questions that are going to pop up. And the questions are necessary because the questions help us to feel. The questions help to put us in the shoes that we once wore. And it doesn't say that we're staying there, but we do have to walk through that place. So there are multitude of different things that each of us have left desolate in our lives. Things that we should have finished, we didn't. Relationships that should have worked, but they didn't. There was a multitude of different things that we left devastated under the guise of our own pain. Under the guise of us being rejected, yet we rejected them, or we rejected the word of encouragement. There's a saying that they say in psychology, hurt people hurt people. Rejected people reject people. Abused people abuse people. So unless we are ready to deal with the things that we have decided to put on the shelf for another day, another moment, another month, another year, I'll handle that next year. And this could be the very reason why some of us don't set New Year's resolutions. And not to say that you have to set New Year's resolution, but this could be the reason why we don't feel like the new year is really a new year. That we're dealing with some of the same stuff that we've been dealing with. Hey, Tim, over on LinkedIn, thank you for joining, man. Appreciate you. So that we're dealing with the very things that we've been dealing with because of our perspective. Because when we are dealing with abandonment, rejection, the loss, the hurt, the pain, the grief on many, many different levels, guys, again, too numerous to name here, at least in this broadcast, of what many of us are dealing with. And put yourself in this situation. that I've been discussing until we can place ourselves in those situations and be prepared to make an honest assessment of what we're dealing with. Not a judgment, but an assessment of what we're dealing with. Because any person who begins to build something or anything that's worth building, ideally you'll make an assessment. You'll survey, kind of see what you're dealing with, see what you're working with. Look at your finances. What's your budget look like? What can you afford? The quality of the material or the quality of the relationship. Those things are essential. So most of us know this, that if you're going to build something, it's worth answering those different questions because they're important. But the challenge is oftentimes because many of us are not secure in our belief system. We fall short of asking those questions because society has already given us a belief system. Social media, what's trending, what's not. The language that some of the young people use today. So society has given us an idea of what this belief system should look like. And so oftentimes we can find ourselves discarding our belief system, kind of like that group thinking, so to speak. Yeah, like that group thinking. If they're doing it, hey, if it's good for them, it's good for me. And this is oftentimes how we find ourselves in the various situations that we're in, is that we don't have a sound belief system. We don't have something that we're secure in, because as soon as the new shiny object shows up, we can find ourselves abandoning that thing that we're tired of or exhausted with, or old traditions, old ideas, for the new shiny object, because we're not secure in our belief system. And here's it's not just a system, guys. I don't want us to take on the vocabulary of intellect or trying to put different words to it. But I do want you to understand that more than just a belief system, it's a relationship. Many of us can absolutely take on the intellect of today. Some of us are very, very smart, but we lack the authentic relationships. And the authentic relationships are the ones, in most cases, that are missing, is what so many of us are hungry for, because we've been given something that essentially is a cover-up, something that it is intended to satisfy us, but yet it doesn't. And when you reach a certain age in your life, and having gone through the redundancy of just certain things in life, or dealing with people and situations that we may have, through no fault of our own, find ourselves in, we can find ourselves still hungry for something more, something with more sustenance, something with more substance, something with meat on it, if you will. Something that can carry you over, something that can allow you to have a good meal and sleep real well. And that's what we're missing. We're missing the sustenance and the substance of life. That is your authenticity. That is who you are. And the more we talk about these different conversations, and whether you're having these conversations with me online, or you're having those conversations with your spouse, your significant other, or with your coach, whoever they might be, the more you can find yourself having these conversations and being authentic, being prepared to peel back the layers. Because let's face it, as I mentioned to you earlier, most of what we're dealing with, guys, is not even our stuff. And I'm not saying that in a way to we're blaming someone. No. I'm saying that we are a product. We all are a product of our parents to a degree. In most cases, you go to the doctor. Example, you go to the doctor. The doctor will ask you what your family history is. And why is that important? Because in most cases, history is not so much just about what our parents did, as it is a pattern that was handed down to us. A pattern of behavior, a pattern of belief, a pattern mindset. So these things can absolutely be carved into us by what we have seen. And so this is awesome, guys. So getting to the point where we're now growing, we're coming out of that place. We've got to get past the things that our parents have not dealt with. Not avoiding them, but get past them, meaning to see them, to deal with them, deal with the feelings that come up out of those places. Because it's now part of your DNA structure. And though you didn't do it, if you can imagine, if you're like your father, or for the woman who's like her mother, that your mother or your father were like their mothers, and your grandmother was like her mother, and so on and so on and so on. So if you can imagine, there's layers upon layers of stuff that we have to get through, that we have to walk through, layers and layers, a valley with some serious depth to it. It's a deep valley. And we have to be prepared to walk through that valley. And when we can walk through that valley, then can we find ourselves coming into who we are. Because we have to peel back the layers. We can find ourselves coming into who we are and now prepared to do the work that God, that life calls us to do. We can now come into that authentic message now. Not oversharing, but through emotional intelligence, you know your audience. So you're not just sharing something or having a conversation with someone for the sake of, I'm being authentic. Because through emotional intelligence, it absolutely intelligently, it says to us, this is what you should share. So as we pick through the files of our different experiences, we find ourselves sharing that information from an intelligent space, knowing what to share, when to share, what's the right conversation to have, what can I pull out of my filing system of experiences and share with my team or my family member or my household. Share with a friend. What can I pull out of my catalog of experiences that I can share with you? So it absolutely becomes important for us to walk through the valley, know that for all of us, there's a valley of hurt, abuse, being abandoned, rejected, all of those things that come with it. Feeling like you're being hated, all of those different things. They represent valleys. And perhaps you're the life of the party too. But in most cases, still, there's a valley. And until we are prepared to walk through this valley, guys, we can't even begin to get to the person that we're desiring to be. We can't even begin to get to that person, to understand who he is, to understand who she is. Because in most cases, we're walking through that valley of stuff that our parents didn't deal with. And as I said earlier, the way out of this valley is to be prepared to have those authentic conversations with yourself. Because until you and I are having those authentic conversations, we're covering up. And the cover up is just an illusion. The cover up is being stagnant. The cover up is the man sitting at the pool of Bethesda for nearly 38 years. And my question to you was, how long have you been in your situation? That was my question. So we're not here to look at the man at the pool and say, oh, that's awful. That's a long time. It can also easily be each of us, because the time goes by when we're rejected, and we're now rejecting the things that we need to deal with. So that time absolutely does go by very, very fast, guys. So I hope this conversation has been a blessing to you. Thank you, Tim, over on LinkedIn, and all of those who may be listening into the replay as well. I wanted to try and stay on for about an hour, guys, because I typically can go much longer than that. And so I hope this conversation has been a blessing to you, and understanding that each of us have a valley. Each of us have gone through something and will go through something. And I think it was Les Brown that said, you're either just coming out of something, or you're headed to something. And this is life. This is life. And again, walking through that valley can absolutely be a scary place. It's a place of unknown obscurity. And I want to leave this with you before I wrap it up here, because this is what I shared with a friend of mine earlier, is that God is not an obscure God. He is not ambiguous. He is who he is. He doesn't question who he is. He doesn't rely on us to be God. He doesn't rely on us. But he is a God who is direct. And here's what I mean by that. Unless you and I have our minds made up about the direction that we're going to go, and we can confidently speak that, share that with God, confidently have that conversation with God and say, God, these are my plans. This is what I want to do. And I'm not saying that they're going to happen or they're not going to happen, but in most cases, before they can begin to even take root, or as I shared with you in the story earlier with Ezekiel, before you can begin to experience the shifting and the change, there's a preparation. And because we may feel that, well, God, you have not said anything. I haven't heard from you in a while. I haven't seen any sign of this this shifting that was taking place as God was speaking to Ezekiel, that I haven't seen anything move. There's no indication that the tendons are growing, the skin is growing back, that life is happening again. Is to wait. To wait. Be still. Because God is not obscure. He's not ambiguous. He doesn't speak in terms where he confuses us, where we need to be confused. So I believe he rests in authentic conversations. Where we find our peace, he finds his peace and joy with us. And those are authentic conversations. And as we're peeling back those layers in authenticity, whether the tears come or not, or even bringing up frustration or anger, let them come. Because that's who God wants to see, especially as most of us, if not all of us, are walking through a valley that in most cases we didn't create. But nevertheless, it's layers upon layers of stuff that we're having to walk through before we can see the diamond that we are. We've got to go through some things, and they're absolutely necessary. Because if not, life will have us walking and talking in obscure language, saying this but meaning something completely different. That's not the God we serve. So that being said, guys, I want to say thank you for allowing me to come before you with this powerful conversation. We've been talking about, can these dry bones live? Breathing hope into life's desolate places. All right. So I hope this conversation has been a good conversation for you, and that you've got something out of it that you can apply to your own life, and know that being authenticity is not, it's not dead. It's very much alive. And that's the thing that I've come to give you, is to bring you life in a way of an authentic message that's going to provoke you to walk through that valley and know that the valley is absolutely necessary. Certain questions and discussions that you might need to have within your own self. Not for judgment, but I need to get through this valley. And you may not be getting through the valley as fast as you want to, but get through the valley so you don't have to keep experiencing those droughts in different areas of your life. So that being said, guys, I want to say good night to you, and we will talk with you later. Ciao for now. Bye-bye.